Correct screen. All right, let's see if we're streaming. Oh, I won't need any headset. And I won't need a random drop of water spraying off my glass. All right, we're streaming. I just had lunch, so I had something really spicy. Because it tasted bad. And I was like, oh, I'll just put in more spice. That's what you get when you cook for yourself out of whatever happens to be left in the fridge. Streaming game dev. Gonna do underwater stuff. I have to spell at least one of these words right, I think, in order for people to be able to read it. There we are. No, that's still spelled wrong. It's not tough, it's stuff. There we are. And then again over here. The sun is shining directly on my hand, which feels really nice because that's the hand that gets cold. Okay. So earlier today I made a video about randomness in video games. David Goder stopped in really quickly. Hello. I didn't realize anybody was here yet. And he says that Georgian language doesn't have any spelling. I know nothing about it, but I do know that English is supposed to, and I think that you're supposed to get the right kind of letters in there, even if you have some leeway on the spelling. People have to be able to interpret it. Right. So we're underwater today. I did some stuff last time between episodes. I modeled that rope over there. See that? Lovely pile of rope that we've got. Obviously, the material is still very temporary, but the basic idea is that this is, we got all the kinds of rope we want, even if in the long run we're going to need to do some work. We're going to need to try and polish these, but for the moment, it's not a big deal. Only issue is that we've got two different albedos for the two different kinds of ropes, so I'm going to go ahead and unify that right now. We can unify that by copying the color from here and pasting it into here. Exciting. So if you want to see how that looks. Now, all of this is still with 0 textures. I mean, the rope has a texture, but nothing else does. And so we're looking at kind of the raw blockout form of what will eventually have elements to it. There's the hill over there. I think I want to tone down the... this is like a really, really bright HUD element. I think I want to tone it way down. Maybe that's what I'll do first. But as we get close, you can see that this is how it looks. We've got a visible set of ropes in various places, which should help us try and get the sense that this place is more inhabited than it would be if it was just like pallets. So I think that that's not too shabby. There are some things I'll have to change and do later, but for now I think it's fine. So let's go ahead and fix this HUD, because this HUD is a little bit super loud, which was good when I first tried it, because I wanted it to be something you'd notice, but I don't want it to be quite this loud, so let's fix it. If we go on over to the player, there we are. We'll be able to just click on the HUD. Yep, there we are. Here's the HUD guide material. It's called the indicator. There it is. So if we take a look, we've got a couple of values like this tint. We've got two basic ways to make this less annoyingly huge. One way is to reduce the brightness of the tint. For example, we can bring it down to something like this. Oh, well, that's being controlled. Sorry. It's being controlled by this up here. So if we bring this down like this, you can see how that brings it way down. The other option is to make the lines thinner. Let's try making the lines thinner as well. In order to do that, we're going to need to pop up a... Oh, that's not the right thing. We're going to have to pop up an art program. Give me a second to arrange that. Oh, that's right. They made it so that we're no longer able to actually select the objects by clicking on them. All it does is blink. Brilliant. Okay, there we are. There we go. And I'll bring you... Well, let me make sure that this is saving correct. We're going to go ahead and call this circ part 05. And I will bring you right back in with a... Nope. That's going to try and stream a video game, which I am not playing right now. So this is how it looks, right? And what we'll do is we will simply double the amount of vertical space by changing the canvas size. There we go. And if I save that, and I come over here and I replace the material we were using, which should be in mission right now. Mission. There it is. There it is. So if I look in here, we got the HUD guide. And here is the script we're using. And we're just going to drop circ part 05 in there. That should radically reduce the size of those glowing stripes. Oh, heater turned on. Don't think I need you today, buddy. It always turns on right when I start streaming. I guess my loud mouth is considered to be cold air. Doesn't seem right. So if we contrast and compare, this is now substantially more slender, to the point where some of the lines are now invisible, which might not be ideal. But that's definitely more in tune with what I want. Let's go ahead and also pull back on the brightness of these leads. Just pull it down to maybe here. A little bit brighter, like that. And that should mean that we won't have nearly as much of a ridiculous setup. Goder says, do casted shadows on the water surface move with the player? No, so the way I'm doing the caustics, which is probably what you're talking about, the way I'm doing the caustics is I am using a directional light that has a cookie. I'm using 2 of them, and I'm kind of phasing them in and out. Because they're directional lights and we are not in the new high def mode, I can have them cast shadows. If that's what you're asking, then that's what it is. Now, you can see that there is this kind of weird dark shadow below us. That's an error caused by the shadow caster trying to shadow cast through something that should be invisible. And what I think I need to do is just move it, because it's... I don't even know what it is. I think it's the UI, but I can't see any reason. There it is. This is it. So I think what we might be seeing here is the fog quad casting a shadow, which is kind of awkward. Yeah, there it is. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off. The fog quad shouldn't be casting shadows anyway, because the actual fog quad shader has shadow casting turned off, but Unity doesn't understand that sometimes. And David Goder says, yes. So that shadow was an error. We do have a lot of other shadows, but most of them are from directional lights. So, and the way that the caustics work is I think I'm scrolling the UV of the caustics rather than wobbling the light itself. Because if I wobbled the light itself, then we would have shadows drifting across the sea, which would feel a little bit strange. Like your shadow would blur and then sharpen and then blur and then sharpen, and that's really not what I want. All right, so now that we've done that little bit of holographic fixing, we have to decide what else we want to do with our life. And basically, I think we want to work on the particles in room 3. David Goder says they would be warped too in case of rotation. Well, sure, but I'm not too worried about the caustics looking a little bit stretched. That's not a huge issue for me. I've tried a bunch of different ways to do caustics, but the only way I could do caustics and have good shadow casting without like programming in the shadow, a shadow hack that looks at like the shadow map. The only way I could figure out how to do it is make it a directional light. And that's actually a big part of the reason why I'm not doing the high def approach, because they only allow for one directional light with shadow casting, and I need 3. So we're going to go ahead and hide room 2. And room 3 is now online. And just to remind ourselves what this looked like. Yeah, so basically what we're doing now is we're going to work on the lighting effects in room 3. Because room 3 has a lot of... oh, I think we are rotating the lights. That's not what I want to do. I might change that later. But room 3 has a lot of God rays in it, and we need to make sure that you can see the God rays. It's supposed to be very, very dark, but I want to use the God rays as something we can detect. What that means is that we've got to do some work on the shader. See the sparkles? What we're going to do is we're going to change how they work using a custom shader. We're going to rely on the custom shader to continue to be used with exactly this setup, which means it's going to be a bunch of billboards. And they're always going to be pointed straight at the player. And what that means is that I will simply use vertex offsets to make the billboards bigger when you're further away. So let's get to it. All right, so let's see if we can find... Oh, look, the new version of Unity fixed the friggin' bug I've been complaining about for the past 3 weeks. I'm so glad. It's unfortunately, it turns out that this particular set of particles is invisible for the moment. So we're going to have to track it down. It should be in here. Where is it? No. No, those are the floating particles that follow the player around. Where is the particle? Didn't I create a particle system for... It was floating right here. I thought maybe I deleted it without saving. And maybe I closed, rather, without saving. Or maybe I dropped it somewhere outside of the correct room. Like maybe I dropped it in room 2 instead of room 3. No, I don't think so. Well, I guess we can just... No, wait, I know it's here because we saw it in game mode. So we're going to hit play, and then we're going to go over there, and we're going to be able to see it, and we'll select it. So if we take a look, this is the room in question, and they should be sparkling along right here. Maybe I have to get closer so that I'd be able to see it. They might not show up in scene view unless you have it selected, which would make sense, but it's also going to be a little bit of a challenge for us because I can't click on it in game mode. So here it is, right in front of us. And if we pause and take a look, all we need to do is click on an invisible thing floating directly ahead of us. So if we select all of room 3, it doesn't appear to be in room 3. If we select all of everything, I guess we can't do it like that. Select all of level. No. Oh, this is it. Okay, so I put it in surface objects because obviously it's a surface object. Whatever. I just got distracted and couldn't figure out what the heck I was doing. Now we are back on track. So now that we've got the particles that I just moved out of room 2, only to realize that I did it in play mode, or room 3, only to realize that I did it in play mode, so it doesn't count. So we're going to do it again. There we are. And then I'm going to rub my eyes and hit restart. Kaboom. There you go. So we're going to need a new shader. Let's go ahead and get to it. We're going to go up into particles, create a new amplify shader. We'll call this scaling particles. So with the scaling particles, they're going to be an opaque shader because the transparency shader is apparently where things go wrong. We may change it later to an alpha pass shader. We'll think about that. But the most critical thing to do is turn off lighting entirely. There we go. Without the lighting, we've got an emissive element. So we're just going to go ahead and use a color for that, which I think is a 5. Yeah. And we'll set that up as a nice warm sunny color like this. And we'll just plug that into emission. The A doesn't matter, so we don't care. And then what we want to do is these local vertex offsets. The problem is that this is a particle system, so this is a lie. There's no such thing as a local vertex offset. All we have is global values. So the real question is whether or not we can figure out how to scale this up if we don't know the local vertex position. Because if it's a normal quad, what you do is you just take the normal vertex position and multiply it by like 2 or 3 or whatever. But if we do that here, I'll show you. If we get a camera fade, so here's the camera depth fade, which will try and determine how far something is away from the camera. And we're going to want to be able to set the length and the offset. So we'll just plug those in here. We're going to call this offset. Going to call this length. And we'll just make this like 20 and 10. Basically, that means that that within 10 meters of the camera, it's going to be a 0 or a 1. I can't remember which. Then for the next 20 meters, it's going to fade to the opposite side, and then it's going to be that. And then we can multiply by the local vertex position. So even though this is the local vertex position in object space, we're not going to find that that's true. Let's go ahead and multiply here. Shaboom and shaboom. Oh, that didn't work. Shaboom and shaboom and shaboom. And if we just hit save. All right, I'm going to try and arrange things on the other screen so that I can still see the chat in case somebody else stops by. So here we are. So here it is, the particle system in question. We're going to switch this classic sun particle over into our new particle shader. Scaling particles. There it is. So the question is, will we be able to even see any changes? Let's find out. What we should see is that the whole effect wobbles radically. The whole effect should be pushed through a wall, and you shouldn't be able to see it at all because the local position is massive. So it's probably going to be in the sky above where we can see. That's my theory anyway. Let's find out. Well, it's certainly not appearing. So my guess is that it is currently in the sky where we can't see it. If we, unfortunately, pausing it and going over to look at it via another view won't really help any because we won't be able to see it. But what I'd hoped is that it would come back down when we got close because that's how the depth fade is supposed to work. Doesn't seem to have. So you can see that the particles in question are right here, and we are... I think we passed through them. Where are we? There we are. So we're still not terribly close to them. Okay, so maybe they're just offset. I mean, that's where they're supposed to be, right? So let's go ahead and keep going that way. You can't see them at all, even though you're supposed to be able to see them from quite a ways away. And the reason is because, there they are. You see how they're skating down past us now? That's because all of their positions are in world space, even though they're theoretically in local space. So the best bet we've got is to see what the normals are like. We might be able to get away with using the normals if the normals are all pointed in different directions. If the normals are all pointed forward, we're not going to be able to do much because that's not really going to help much. So instead of using the vertex position, we're going to use the normals. We could use the world normal or we could use the local normal. They're going to be the exact same thing. So The problem is, I think that they are all just pointing forward. I think that there's no... I don't think that these are scaled such that the normals are pointed outwards. I think I'm going to have to use a mesh. We're going to have to use a circular quad or a spherical quad for it. Which, I mean, isn't terrible, but it's a little bit less efficient, and efficiency is kind of the name of the game here. So I'm seeing whether or not these things are any bigger. They don't appear to be. I think they're all just 1 meter off. Yeah. Yeah, they're no bigger. Well, a meter is a tremendous amount. So if they were any bigger, we would see them because it would be the same size as us, and that's not the case. So we are going to have to use a different quad. That's Twitch. That's not what I was trying to drag over. Here's what we were trying to drag over. So this should work as long as the normals behave. So in order to get the normals behaving, we're going to switch out from using a billboard to using a mesh. And we are going to choose the spherical quad. There it is. The spherical quad is just a quad that has normals pointed outwards. The only problem with this is that the spherical quad might not be in the correct local rotation. So even though it's aligned to our view, we might end up seeing all of these particles on their sides. So if that's the case, I'll have to go in and change the spherical quad's setup. It looks like it's not the case, though. They don't look a meter bigger, though. I mean, they're definitely bigger, but they're not a meter bigger. All right, so we're going to do some testing here. All I'm going to do is bring the world normal straight into the local vertex offset without bothering to multiply it by anything, so that it'll be bigger regardless. And then we can just immediately go look at the particle system. I don't think we've got a skate over there. Yeah, here it is. So, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of glow, but I can't. Fuck you. Particle system. So these don't look any bigger to me. I'm not hallucinating, am I? The spherical quad, let's pull it up, make sure that I know what I'm talking about here. So if we look for the spherical quad, which, maybe it's not what I thought it was. Spherical quad. There it is. So this is the spherical quad, and basically, even though you can't see it, there it is. What we've got for the normals is that we are mapping the normals to this sphere in the middle. And that should be a radial out normal map, so it should be pointing straight out the sides, which means that multiplying by the world normal should give us a really big result. I mean, it should make everything a meter bigger. Is there no local vertex offset? Because let's go ahead and put in some noise and try it with noise and see what we get. So over here where you can't see, I'll bring up some 3D noise. And we will just use the world position for the noise. One of the options is it might not have a concept of a world normal because it's using a local normal for that. It might be something like that. Hopefully not, though. Okay, so the vertex offset works. That much at least is true. Here you can see what we get if we just use noise. That's what the issue is. It's not a meter. It's a meter in local space coordinates. So even though they have no concept of local location or rotation, they do have a concept of local scale. It's a really screwed up situation. It's very confused. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this back, and then we're just going to multiply it by a large number, like, say, a number we type in, which we will call scaling. We'll make that 10 meters. That should give it 5 times the size. These are constants. Let's change them out for properties. Sorry, I'm doing this all on the left screen, which I'm sure is super useful if you want to actually see what's going on. All right, so in theory, they should now be noticeably larger when we're further away. The only issue is that although they are noticeably larger, they're still very... That's weird. There's something wrong. That's not how things are supposed to work. What's going on? All right, for now, let's go ahead and change the values here to something a little bit more noticeable. So we'll just go ahead and make it 1, 1 here. And you can see that what's happened is they've gone away. So it looks like what they're doing is they're moving towards the screen. Why would they be doing that? Because they're unlit, so it's overriding the normal with a normal that's... Their view rotated, but apparently it's overriding their normals. This is weird. David Goder says, shaders are hard. Yeah, well, they're harder when you're using a particle system that doesn't follow the rules that it's supposed to use. So my theory here is that because it's in render alignment view, no, even in this mode, it's not really... We're not really getting the normals we should be getting. These world normals should be going every which way. But instead, they're only going one way. They're pointed a specific direction. That's... You're making it hard. You're making it hard to do this. The only other way I know how to do this is to use a larger quad and do an alpha fade on a transparency using alpha clip, which I guess is what we're going to have to do because this is not working out. Go figure. So that's fine. We'll just go ahead and do that. So we'll stop the game. And over here, we're going to have to put in a texture. And then we'll multiply the texture by the color. There we are. And then the alpha we'll use for an alpha clip. So down here, we're going to switch this over into alpha test. It's still opaque, but now we've got this opacity. So we're going to just go ahead and keep the camera depth fade. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these 3 things together and drop that into the opacity mask. So save that, drag that off screen for a minute. And here's our texture sample 0. Let's go ahead and name that something a little bit better, like just say texture. We'll call it albedo. And the albedo is this soft default sphere. The problem is I don't know if this goes from white to black or from white to transparent. We'll replace it depending on what we find out. So if I hit restart here, I don't see anything. Let's turn selection outline back on. So here it is. You can see we've got this. Let's switch out this for a billboard again. And my guess is that they're simply too small. Wait. Where's our color? So the problem is that the color is black, and I forgot to actually make it... not black, but it's transparent. But I forgot to make the color a property. There we go. And then just there. That should be a little bit better. The problem is I think we're going to have to increase the size of these, which is no big deal. But I can't see anything. I think the camera fades backwards, but that shouldn't. Let's go ahead and put in 1- into the camera fade operator here, because it's actually not even 1-, it's a remap. Let's go ahead and put in a remap here. It goes between 0 and 1, maybe. It might not be clamped, but we need it to go between like 1 and 0.3. There we go. So now when I zoom out, do we have more or less? The question is whether or not it gets... I think I might have it backwards. Let's try it just the opposite direction here. Maybe this isn't clamped. The camera depth fade isn't clamped? I would have thought that would have definitely been clamped. Let's go ahead and clamp it. See, right now it's backwards. This is at max opacity here. And then as I move back, it turns invisible. See, that's exactly the opposite of what I want. But when I try and invert it, it doesn't work. Let's invert it here. Well, I have a feeling that I'm just doing something really obvious and stupid, and I just don't know what it is. So what we're going to do is we are going to replace the current albedo system with a color lerping system based on the alpha. So if it's white, that means we're at 1. And if we go back, it should turn grayer and then black. It doesn't seem to, does it? Let's take the alpha transparency out. Let's just draw the whole shebang. All right, so what am I seeing? Maybe the problem is this. So we should have a texture to replace that, and if not, I can go build one. It's just a very, very basic... Okay, so that's actually the opposite of what we want. But that should still be enough to tell us whether or not it is doing things right. So as we get further away, it seems to turn black. It's turning gray at the very least. Yeah, so if we were to change the length and the offset, yeah, so you can see that it turns darker the further away you get here, which means that it's closer to 0. And what we really want to do is be closer to 1 the further away we are. So that means that our remap, it just has to be in the opposite order. Why does it fart and die when I invert it? So that's 1. And then that's good. So the closer we get, the darker it gets. It never... Okay, so that's better. So this value is correct, but for some reason it was flaking out on actually setting up the opacity correctly. So that's good, and then come in. Oh, sorry, I popped it into the wrong input. Yeah, so that's close to how I want it. But here's the thing. This mask actually has an opacity of 1 over here. It should never vanish. I've set the opacity masking to 0.1 in the shader, but it might be... there we go. Might actually even be better at 0.1's fine. So the idea here is that you're nice and bright, and then as you get in, they fade. But the problem here is, of course, that this is the opposite shape of what I want. I could invert the alpha, but I think it makes more sense to just create or use an existing alpha that has the correct setup. There. So that should work, except for I think that this is not as nice as I think it ought to be. We're going to go ahead and just create our own real quick. There's no big deal. So if we just pop over into the punch hole mask, here it is. We're going to go ahead and call this a blob mask, a soft mask. And we're just going to invert it. So and the idea here is that it should be 1 at the center, but it has a very soft fall off. More or less like that. So now that we have a soft mask, we can come back over here and drop that soft mask in. So the image is selected, but I can't. So hold on. That's a dust cloud. There it is. So what we're going to do is we are just going to switch out. Or you could crash. That was weird. Bloom. All right, so that's the idea, but you can see that it's not actually getting any thinner here. The particles are darkening, but they don't appear to be getting any less opaque. Let's see how it looks. It's hard to tell in this mode. There are a lot of things we can do to kind of spruce this up. We might use streaky verticals or some other kind of boxy shape. We may reduce the overall size of the object or tighten up the fade so that it's a sharp fade instead of a soft fade. Lots of things that we probably want to try and do. Obviously, that's a little bit much. But as we get closer, they don't appear to be... Whoa, I forgot. I changed the visuals so that they're no longer... They don't make any sense anymore. So over here, we're going to change this to back to 10, 20. There we are. So this is as small as they get, which is obviously quite large. We'll want to reduce that. And then as we run away... So there's a couple of things that we're going to want to do. We definitely need to change this. This is not pointy enough, as it turns out. We need to be sharper towards the center, and I'm not sure whether or not there's a good setup for that. But also, I don't like the way that it is just a soft blob. Well, maybe we'll figure that out later. For now, I guess the only thing to do is to... Thank you. Is to use a soft eraser around the sides to try and reduce the... You know what? Let's go ahead and just delete this and try something a little bit else. So we'll just use a really soft brush here. And then we will tighten it down. Actually, we can switch over to using a hard brush, I guess. We'll use a nice fat hard brush. Oh, that's too wide. That's not wide enough. That should be considerably harder. And then we'll just put in a little white dot in the middle. Okay. That work? Yeah. So hit save. And the other thing we're going to need to do is we're going to want to adjust the particle system's values to be a little bit more in line with what we want. So we're going to take this color and we're going to drop it down to here-ish. We may also multiply the emission by how far away, how close the camera is. So if the camera is close, it'll glow brighter because you'll have smaller particles. But if you're far away, it'll glow softer and kind of give you a general glow instead of this giant wall of sparkles. So there's the giant wall of sparkles. The shimmering that we're getting is due to particles popping in and out of existence. Okay, so these particles are definitely too big, and we also need to pipe the alpha into our shader, which we can do simply by turning on custom vertex streams. The color should be passed in properly now, and so if we do an alpha over lifetime, here it is, we can just drop in a little bit of a fade on each side. And then we can come on over into here. Hello again. And what we're going to do is add in the color alpha as another member of this multiply here. So in order to do that, we're going to need to take in color. I believe that we need vertex color. I think that it counts as vertex color. Just drop that in. And we also need to just reduce the size. They look like metaballs. Yeah, they're definitely not how I want them to be yet. They're gonna need some more work. The restriction that we have to use opaque shaders is quite a nasty one. Any second, we should see them. That was weird. All right, let's try one more time. Clearly there's something screwy going on here. It's almost like the camera distance thing is inverted again. No, that can't be it. Sorry, I'm thinking about what it might be, and I'm not coming up with any real answers. It might simply be that the albedo soft mask we're using is too crappy. You can see how it's got like this really obvious step. Is the depth camera providing like an integer value? That's strange. Well, we'll drop this back into emission. All right, so now we are using the opacity mask value as an emission, and you can see that these darker gray ones have a lower opacity mask, and they're closer. You can tell because they're bigger. Yeah, so that should work. It's just that we don't have the right texture to make it work with, I guess. This is really, I didn't expect it to be this hard to make a texture that would make this work. It's just like super basic, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to use just some opacity layers. which we'll do just by selecting random splots. Maybe I should make these each 20 or 25. Just boop a doop. And then at the last particular element, we'll just put a dot in the middle. I think there's something wrong with my brain, though. This shouldn't be as hard as it is. I'm doing something stupid here, and I don't know what it is. So you can see how they're not changing transparency at all. They're all the same transparency regardless of whether they're close or far. No, maybe they're not. They seem to be, though, because the one in front of my face is. So I don't think that the albedo transparency is properly working. Because I dropped in the wrong thing, didn't I? I dropped in sand bubble. God damn it. Thank you, Unity. Clearly what I wanted to do was grab something that was nowhere near what I was trying to grab. But these are also giving us some trouble. All right, so let's take away the noise for a second. Without the noise, we should be able to really see whether or not they are fading out properly. So they don't appear to be fading out. They appear to just be changing color. There is one moment, this. Now that's that particular element. That shows up when things are... hold on. When I use a negative length offset, well, that might just be because the offsets are so close to 0. But that's how I want it to be. See how that's... well, it's not going very far, is it? You know what? Let's just put in a number that we can adjust. No, not test. And we'll replace the camera distance with that number for a minute. That way we can just go ahead and boop. So here you can see me adjusting the number, and there is a value for which this actually works, but it is really sensitive. See how sensitive that is? Between like 0.2 and 0.7, and that's it. 0.2 and 0.27, I meant to say. That's ridiculous. Okay, so this is partly a problem with the albedo, but it almost feels like there is another problem, another thing happening. If we were to drop this down to 70. That's actually pretty close to how I want it to be. But I'm not sure where we're getting this massive positive number from that requires me to multiply it by like 0.25. It might be the mask clip value is too high, but that doesn't make any sense, now does it? So clearly the mask clip value has more of an effect than I was thinking. Okay, so for some reason it works fine as long as the mask clip value is Set it as 0.5. Whatever. So here you can see what we've got is it shows up and then it vanishes as you get close. Obviously, it shouldn't be like that. It does need to be a little bit like that, but the effect here is so hilarious. So if we were to drop this down to 0.1 again and try. I can't really tell because the color is so dark. Let's see how it looks in the game. I was expecting something easy here, but because it's a particle system, it's just the most nightmarish thing. I really should just be able to stretch the quads. I wouldn't have to do any of this if I could stretch the quads. Alright, so there it is in the distance. It's still pretty sparkly. I think we can probably reduce the size of these by another factor of 2 or 3 here. But I'm seeing that these are not... I feel like these are full size. So if we switch this over to showing outline, they seem to be full size. Yeah, they're supposed to be a sunbeam, but I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And it's not working out. It's being really annoying. Alright, so here, this is more like what I had in mind. 0.14, 0.2. That's closer to what I want. That's pretty close. There are still a lot of things left that I want to polish. But the basic idea, kinda, not really. The problem is I can't do transparent effects for these, not in a room that's supposed to be dark, because it will error out, and it always does. So I have to make sure that it's all opaque effects. And the opaque effects have turned out to be a real nightmare. We're going to turn noise back on, but what we're going to do is we're going to separate the axes, and we're going to give it only the... Woo! That's interesting. How does that look in the game? Yeah, it's supposed to be a turbulence effect, but I want to know whether or not it makes this look cooler. I mean, it makes no sense, but it looks really neat, doesn't it? I'll just have to tuck this away for use later. I'll create some kind of holographic effect with it later. For now, let's see whether or not we can make the effect how it's supposed to be. So if we switch this over to having just Y values, apparently it needs just Z values. Stop that. Basically, I only want them to go up and down. They appear to be frozen, though, rather than moving up and down at all. David Goder says the waves are too thin. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with it. We'll go ahead and leave it like this. So basically, the problem is if I add in noise without any sort of bias on the axes, it doesn't really end up looking like a sunbeam. It ends up looking like a weird column of life forms. So we're going to go ahead and try and get that to just go up and down mostly. It still flickers. It's not very convincing. I like this part. Yeah, David Goder doesn't like it. I don't know what to do. I've tried a bunch of different effects, and none of them have really worked out. Because the simple fact of the matter is that a sunbeam is just partially transparent, and it should be modeled using a transparent shader. I just can't get a transparent shader to work when I've got thick fog. Maybe I should look back into that and try and take another stab at maybe putting it on its own pass or something. I just haven't had any luck. Alright, so when I darkened it severely, it really reduces the amount of glitter. It reduces the amount of everything, really. Like dust particles. They're not spheres, they're actually squares. One thing I thought about is I could make it so that the particles are not particles, but are sets of particles with larger quads. But since it's view-oriented, that would mean that as you moved through them, all of the particle quads would slope, and you just see the particles keep fizzing around in a weird way. I honestly don't know. Let me think for a second. Well, first off, this is part of the problem. This is supposed to be 1020. I was doing testing, and I changed it. Let's go ahead and try a transparent shader one more time. Let's try and create a transparent shader that might be able to work in this environment. I just don't know how to do it. Oh, they just completely vanish when I have this set up. Let's go ahead and tweak it so they don't completely vanish. My guess is that if I increase the mask clip, there we are. That'll do. No, they're still very square, aren't they? We'll work on it. I think this mask clipping is not... It's just not reliable enough. Because these are actually full size. I can tell by the way they vloop away at the end of their lifespan. That vlooping away should be just a pop. There shouldn't be any of this. Sorry, I'm trying to figure this out, and it is really confusing the hell out of me. I can't help but feel like I've got them backwards. Like the far away is still not scaling up, it's scaling down. It feels like that to me. That's really... I've gone through this like a dozen times trying to figure out, you know, what's up with that. But the fact that we can't see it yet implies that the camera fade is backwards. No, it's definitely vanishing as we get close. Look at that. It's gone. So if I increase the mask clip value... No? They do come back. Okay. So it's correct. It's just not very nice to look at. Okay, so let's go ahead and do one more run with transparent shaders. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to just create a giant friggin' quad. Come on, Unity. I thought you fixed this bug. No? They fixed one of my UI bugs and not the others. That's fine. So now we've got this big quad, which we're just going to make even bigger. And then we're just going to stick it somewhere in the water here. We're going to want to have it so that it is like maybe there. And the idea is that we're going to try some transparent shaders on it just to see whether or not we can get them to work in the first place. So if we come up here into prefabs, nope, materials, particles, create a new amplify shader. Gonna call this transparency test. Gonna create a new material. Drop it on Shibumi. So here's our transparency test, and basically we're going to tell it that it is going to be doing an alpha pass. So the question is, what are we going to do? Well, I guess the first thing we should do is add in a texture. And that's like 90% of what we want. But the problem is how it looks when we put it into the game environment. So here we've got the object, and we're just going to switch out this transparency value for any of our transparent textures. It doesn't really matter which one. Streaky verticals, that'll do. And you can see how in this mode, you can see it fine. Let's see how it looks when we go into the game mode. Now, the reason we can see it fine in scene view is because there's no fog in scene view. Once a fog comes in and starts to get dense, how the transparent objects work becomes really iffy. You might be wondering where it is. The answer is you can only see it in very, very specific circumstances. So it's actually right here. Where are we? Yeah, see, we're off to... Just rotate it. Can you see it? There it is. See it? Right in front of us. So what's happening here is that our light is shining on it, and that makes it substantially more visible. But even if we were to rotate it back so it would get some light, it has something weird going on where it only draws while it's on top of something close, instead of drawing period. It doesn't count as having depth is basically the problem. So the fog is like, oh, well, the fog checker is checking to see how far away the depth is, and it's seeing that there is nothing there, so the depth is quite far, which means that we do want to mark it as an alpha right on the depth buffer. But if we do that, it'll screw some other stuff up. We'll try it, though. So over here, if we take a look, what we want to do is depth buffer. Depth buffer is only available for custom and opaque. Well, in that case, we're going to turn it to custom, I guess. There we are. And then what we're going to want to try and figure out how to do is how to get it to right to the Z buff. So here we have a right on. So if we turn writing on, how do you think it'll look? Well, first off, I didn't realize I'd pointed it sideways. So let's go ahead and point it that way. And we'll bring it forward so we don't have to drive as far. Come on. Well, it should be pretty much right here. Huh. What in the world? Where is it? Oh, is that it over there? That must be it. So now that it has the right buffer, you can see what it's doing is even the transparent parts are counting as opaque when it comes to the depth buffer, which means that it is ending up making it so that the fog effect is completely canceled out, which would be fine if it was floating in space, but if you can see rocks behind it, it screws up their depth. Well, I'll try a couple of different things here. Right now we're doing an alpha blend. It's interesting. We could probably try a soft additive because, yeah, so there you can really see the problem. It is creating a window to the objects behind it. If we turn it to pre-multiplied and try that, oh, it's still. So alpha blend is the best we have at the moment. It's nice that this works in play mode. So if we do an extra depth pass, oh, that's definitely, is that better? It might be better. Let's try it without that depth pass and see what the difference is, if any. I don't think there's a difference. I'm not really sure what the extra depth pass does. What I really want is for this to happen after the fog. So maybe I can just push the execution. Let's turn off some of these values for fog and such. But if I can push the Q, that I think is actually pretty close to what I want. So maybe all I have to do is push the Q up. So you can see here, I've told it to go on 46 instead of whatever. So it now happens after the fog, at least in theory. Now it's still getting lit. It's still casting shit onto it. But that is because I've not told it that it's an unlit shader. So let's go ahead and tell it to not do any lighting pass. And this will be the emission. And maybe the problem is the emission. Okay, so that's... Let's multiply the emission by the alpha for reasons that should be relatively obvious. That's still too high. Okay, so that's pretty much like I want it to be. Okay, so all I had to do, my 3 weeks wasted, what a friggin' waste of everybody's time. All I had to do was this. The problem was which depth pass it was on. We'll call this a... Wait, I don't even think we need to have this as a custom shader. I think we can just use a normal shader. Transparent. And all we need to do is push the Q index back to say 30. And not cast shadows, not receive shadows. Hit save. Yeah, literally all I had to do was push the render queue back to behind the fog. The only issue with this is that this is now going to be visible from however far away you are. Like, you can be miles away, and since the fog no longer works, it never goes away. So what that means is we have to add in a depth fade. So let's do that. So if we add in the camera depth fade here, just take that vertex position and we'll just punch in some values for this. And then we will simply multiply it here. And we're also going to need to have one more, which we're just going to call the absolute multiplier. Or maybe we should just make it a color. Yeah, obviously it should be a color tint. And we'll give it a default value of that. Yeah. That should be all we need to do. So now if we look at that quad that we've got, here it is, we should be able to get it to be, you see the camera's backwards. So that's not a big deal. We're just going to reopen the shader and invert the camera distance. There we go. But the other thing we need to do is that 1 minus also needs to be applied to the opacity. Except for I think it needs to be directly here. I think it's not the 1 minus that we want. It's the actual value. No, the camera fade of 1 is far away, and the camera fade of 0 is close. So we want this to be more transparent when it's far away. Yeah, so 0 is close. That means that we need to use this. We'll know for sure in a minute here. Actually, let's pull this back. Yeah. See how it gets like really, really bright? Wham! Obviously, the depth fade needs to be adjusted. Maybe give it a length of 60. And that should be what we want. Oh my god, I should have just done this 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, months ago. So you can see we can already see it hiding back there behind the rock. So it looks like our depth fade is a little bit aggressive. We'll just pull it way back, like 5 and 20. The only thing I don't like about this is you can see how when you tilt the camera, it vanishes. I think that has to do with the depth calculation and not the and not like the lighting effects from my headlamp. All right, so it's backwards. Okay. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought it would be backwards, but we can easily fix that by just not using the 1-. Clearly, I am going to misunderstand which direction is 0 and which direction is 1 forever. Oh, well, no, that seems pretty bright. Okay, so now it's backwards. Am I hallucinating? Well, one thing I need to do is clamp it, because I think that it's unclamped. That was way too bright for a clamped version. And then we'll do 1-. And maybe it is that one of them needs to be... no, they should be the same direction, because if it's more transparent, I don't want it to glow as much. So a 0 should be a 0 on both the color glow and on the transparency. Yeah, so this time I can't see it. So that means that it's working. And it's simply that the values are a little bit aggressive. Yeah. This is pretty much how I want it. Obviously, this is not what we're going to use. I'm just kind of setting it up. So, with that in mind, we don't have to call it the transparency test anymore. Let's go ahead and rename it, since we're going to want to keep it. We're going to call it late transparency. And we're going to take this classic sun particle and we're going to just get it to be using the new late transparency system. There it is. And we're going to go ahead and delete the classic sun shader that we created. Scaling particles. Because those don't friggin' work. And this we can just delete, don't need it anymore. So obviously the classic sun particles are not set up correctly just yet. Let's go ahead and do that. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and hiccup a whole bunch. So what I've got over here is the previous setup for our systems. And all they have is a light in the middle and then a cylinder around the light, which was using this sunbeam shader. Turns out the sunbeam shader just didn't work. But if we were to switch over to using the classic sun particle shader, okay, so you can see what we've got here is the shader is, well, first off, the tint is this really aggressive green for some reason. We'll just go ahead and bring it in like that. Do we have a shader, a texture there? Unfortunately for us, it won't tell us. See? It'll let us open it if we double click on it, but it won't actually, you know, pop it up in the window. Who thought this was a good idea? God, what a dumbass setup. So we'll just click this so we can actually see it in the future. There we go. The problem is that streaky verticals is vertical, and that means that this sunbeam here, the cylinder, I think it actually uses horizontal setups. Either way, we might be able to make it work using tiling. So what I'll probably end up doing is creating a particle effect that has a similar setup here. Let's just see how this looks, though, before I do anything else. 20 is too short, though. There it is. See it? Doesn't look quite right just yet, but we're definitely much, much closer to being on the same track, on the right track. Other than the fact that it's low grade and frozen in place, it's kind of close to being right. Let's go ahead and pop open this funnel and see what the heck it is. I think it's just a funnel. I don't think I did anything special with it. So it actually has, that's not the funnel. That's the funnel. Funnel. So what I'm really interested in is this. So if we take a look here, the top of the funnel is the top of the charts. So what that means is that if we have a funnel and we want it to be brighter at the top, we just use a top-heavy alpha texture and we have it fade out towards the bottom. And what we can do is we can simply have a particle system that uses these meshes. So that's what we're going to set up right now. Don't need that. Just get rid of it. So here in the Sunbeam, we're just going to create a new particle system. Kaboom. And you can see how that looks, right? We're going to want to have this on just a basically a line. Is line an option? I think line is an option. Edge. That'll do. And what we'll do at the edge is we will give the edge a nice long radius, like say 30. 30 is a little bit too long. Let's make it 10. That 10 is a little too short. There's our Goldilocks number, 20. Why not? And of course, the edge is not on the correct axis, but we should be able to rotate it, and that'll be fine. It's also set in the middle of the particle rather than at the core of the particle, which we can just fix by offsetting it by 10. Nope, that's the wrong axis. There we go. No, not 10. Yeah, 20, I guess. That's fine. Let's make it 18. I'm not sure why it's such a weird number. And the last thing we need to do is set up the rest of the particles. So we're going to go ahead and give it a start speed of 0. We're going to give it some color over lifetime here, primarily for alpha. We're going to switch the renderer over to do a mesh renderer in world coordinates, or local, I guess. Go local. And we're obviously going to use our funnel. So that's what our funnel looks like when it's displayed like this. And you can see that it is radically incorrect. Now I think we can rotate it, but I'm a little confused as to why it's shaped like that. Because it's in local and we're scaled in local? Is that what's going on? No? What happens if we put it in world? Okay. It's wrong in a different way. Well, our start rotation, if we try and change it, it just goes around the center of the particle. So we do need to turn on a 3D start rotation. This is pretty normal. I think that's just upside down. There we go. The problem is that the size is not correct. I'm not sure why the size is like this. It's really weird. Obviously, that's not it. X? Why X? What's going on here? There's something. Oh, we're inside a sunbeam. Is a sunbeam scaled? Is that what's going on here? No. Is surface objects scaled? Well, yes, but it's scaled symmetrically, so it doesn't matter. This should be much easier than it is. I've done this like dozens of times. I don't know why it's giving me grief now. I think maybe this line system was just a mistake and I should have stuck with something a little bit better, like a cone. We'll go ahead and put it back to being a cone. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, and it's really being weird. Maybe I broke it. Why does the cone not have a length? Fuck it. Kaboom. It's gone. And we're just going to create another new one here, because that's what you do, right? So, particle system. So now that we've got everything set up again, let's try it again. Mesh. Funnel. You can see how it's on the wrong axis here. I'm tempted to just go in and edit it back to being the correct axis. Let's go ahead and pop this open. And basically the issue here is that the funnel, this one here, is just on the wrong axis. It won't let me select it. There we are. If we take a look, it's on the x-axis for reasons that are unknown to me. So we're going to just rotate it. We're going to call this funnel Z. There we go. It's still strange. Is this like scaled? Hold on, let's close that. Hello? Is this scaled? It doesn't feel like it's scaled. No, it's not scaled. I don't really know why it is giving us these wide, flat cones. That's very worrying, because if it gives us wide, flat cones and there's no reason for it to, there's something seriously wrong. And when I scaled it up, it behaved very strangely. It's going the wrong direction. All right, so hold on. The wrong direction thing I can fix. Let's go ahead and go inside here and then just GUI. And that's going to be save. Okay, so now it's no longer going the wrong direction when I scale it up. But it's not scaling up on the correct axes. I'm not sure why. Did they change this or something? Because I don't remember ever having to do this. As I remember every single time I use a mesh that is, not cubical, it didn't like cubicalize it for me. It just kind of left it the shape it was. But this one seems to be changing things so that it is, oh, fuck you. It seems to be changing things so that it is like, square. What I'm worried about now is that we're going to have to just unpack this prefab and start over. You can see how this cylinder is not straight down the sunbeam. It is straight down the sunbeam, but the particle system isn't straight down the sunbeam. You can see how the particle system is not going in the direction that you want it to go. And I think that's because it's in world mode. It needs to be in, it needs to be in local mode. And you can see how that creates total garbage that makes no sense. All right, so just reopen here, rotate it one more time. Nope, can't do it like that. Okay, well that's like how I expected it to be. So I guess that fixed it, but it's still wrong in that I have to stretch it, and it should already be stretched. It's pre-stretched. Well, whatever. Down here, we're going to switch the default particles over to our new material. No, you're an idiot. So you can see we've got this shimmy, shimmy, shaka, shaka. I don't know whether or not the late transparency takes color. No, so we'll add this in. What we're going to do is we're going to take in a vector color or vertex color. There it is. Vertex color is just the color that is being passed from the shader. And so instead of having a tint here, we'll just have the vertex color. And as long as we pass the vertex color in, it should work fine. Oh, except for we're not using the vertex color as part of the opacity chain. So we're going to have to add that in there too. That's fine. No biggie. So let's see. I'm just trying to get a feel for it. Right now we're not passing it in any colors. There we go. If we go over here into the color section, you can see how it passes in the color just fine. Let's give it a nice warm color, but reduce that opacity. We do not need anywhere near this many elements, so let's bring the emission down to like a 1, and then we'll wonder why it's snapping in and out of existence. That's not supposed to happen. We have a color over lifetime? We do not. Okay, so there. Now we're going to have a... that's right. That's the other one. Just give it some shading. So now they should fade in and out over the course of about 5 seconds rather. And let's just go ahead and see how that feels in practice here. Oh, I need to change their size. That's fine. We'll do that too. David Goder says it seems to look pretty good. It certainly looks better than what I had before. This is kind of close to how I want these to look. I think they are currently much, much too aggressive. So let's go in and just tone them way down for a second. That should, in the next couple of seconds, it should start to spawn in the quieter ones. They turn decolored or desaturated. That's strange. So the vertical chunking thing that I did is going to need some work. I don't think we can use this texture. But this is certainly much, much closer to what I had in mind. So we're going to just reduce this alpha quite a bit. And then down here, that should be automatic. And then here is our final result. We've got these blocks. I guess we'll leave it like that for now. I'm trying to think about what would look good, and I don't know. Clearly this is the wrong thing just because it's not correctly Y-aligned. David Goder says, can they have a thickness? It would look smoother. I'm not sure what you mean by a thickness, but we certainly have a lot of work left to do to establish a sense of depth. Oh, one of the problems is they don't have a random rotation. So we'll go ahead and implement that right now. So I don't know why they're so white. Okay. So apparently when I have a start color that has an alpha, it reduces the saturation of the color. Whew, that's weird. So we'll reduce the alpha in here instead. No, it's still pretty white. That's really, really weird. Okay. Well, since there's no difference in where we do it, let's keep it clean and put it back here. And we'll just go ahead and de-alpha here. Let's go ahead and put in some size differences and some random rotations. So we're going to want to have a random between two constants. And the idea here is that if we're between 15, and then we can scale it up or down some. No, that's supposed to be a 1. Maybe we should make this a 2. There we are. And then we also need to have a random rotation, which I believe, yeah, it's going to have to be 3D. Yes, that feels right. So we're going to have it do it between two constants, negative 180 and 180. And I don't know what I'm seeing in the middle there. Is that not part of this effect? Oh, is that the original cylinder? Fuck you. So the desaturated thing I was seeing was the original cylinder. Great. Okay. So now that we no longer have that original cylinder in the way, let's polish this in play mode here. I was wondering why it seems so strangely static. And that's because I had left a bar of white in the middle. What is that, soap? So I tuned it way down, and I think I need to tune it back up. It's also a little bit too yellow. That's actually pretty close to how I had envisioned it. Could be better. There are some really noticeable bars across there. But I think we can actually tweak that without changing the texture. So right now what we've got is a situation where the top is at the top of the texture. But if we were to do a Y offset like this, we can drag them up. See that? So that'll put the top and the middle of the texture, which means that the brightness will be at the top rather than partially below the surface for some reason. And we will still have that weird cutoff, but the cutoff happens at the bottom, which almost seems reasonable. And later on we can figure out what kind of texture we want to use instead. It kind of pulses a little bit too much. Let's go ahead and slow it down a touch. Oh, I shouldn't do this in play mode because it's just going to reset. Yeah. So we're going to take it so it's not quite so white. And we are also going to delay that, move this, change the rate over time. Hello, I didn't tell you to do it like that. There we are. I didn't expect it to actually work. All right, so now we're on our way towards having lights again. Nice. So if I were to come over here and take a look, you can see how as we get into the beam, the light hits us, and that's kind of the whole point. Let's call that good enough. So in order to save that, we're going to have to go ahead and overwrite the existing prefab. There we go. The only question is what happens to these guys? Do they get updated properly? They do. Yay. Okay, and then we've got that one particle system that we don't want anymore. That one, right? Is this the one? Yeah, that's the one. Goodbye. Now, we'll probably revisit this, but now that I can get the transparencies to work, what I'm doing is the two transparencies still don't work together. The fog and this transparency engine are still at odds. But now this one happens after the fog. And so what I'm doing is I've created a shader where it happens after the fog, and it simulates the effect of the fog by simply having a distance rating. So it kind of just pretends that there's a fog, and that's why it fades into darkness as you get further away. In rooms with less aggressive fog, I might have to change that value. No big deal. The light doesn't seem very bright here, does it? It's super bright on me, but when it hits that ground, it doesn't really give you that really, really brilliant glow. And I think the reason for that is that it is fading out. That's the rock should be lost in saturation. I mean, it should be like brilliant. See how bright I make it with my light? And if we move out of the light, it's the same brightness. Is the light not hitting the rock? Is there some kind of value where this light has I suppose I could turn the shadows back on for these lights. I turned them off because I was unsure of how it was going to work. Let's turn the shadows back on for now. At least that way I'll be able to see what's going on. And it might be that the range is too low, but I don't want the range to be super high. I've been talking a lot today, so I'm going to have to stop soon. But we got something done that I wasn't sure we were ever going to get done. Transparencies. There we are. Yeah, the light isn't really doing much for the rocks. That's really weird. There's nothing special about the rocks. They're not unlit rocks. Is it a side effect of the fog, maybe? Yeah, so see, I do have a shadow, but it's like super faint. That looks really bad, though. I'll have to think about it. So, even though it's emissive, it's darker than the surface behind it. Let's go ahead and see how it looks when it's mapped exactly to that same surface color. Let's just try it out for scale here. Oh, I just changed the fucking light's color. The light was the one thing I didn't care about. Let's try that again. I think there's an eyedropper. I probably should just use the eyedropper. I think it's a little too cyan. It's fine. I just need to get an impression of whether or not this is worth doing. Why are you still yellow? Oh, I only changed it for that one particle beam. Well, it's less distracting like this. What happens if I just make it flat white? What if the player flashlight had a similar effect? David Goder asks. That's not a bad idea. Let me go ahead and set this up to be flat white, and then we'll try it. So up here on the player, we have a flashlight in our skull. I believe it is actually mounted automatically, and it's part of the Prefabs Tooltech Mask Effects. There it is. So this is it. And the mask effect has a spotlight. This is the guy. And what we can do is inside the spotlight, we can add a 3D object, like say a cube. And then we can just adjust that cube until it is the thing we actually want it to be, which is not a cube at all. So no box collider. And we're going to go for a funnel Z. There we are. There's our funnel Z. Why is it? Am I hallucinating? What the hell's going on? Why is this funnel so short? Oh, you know what? I'm an idiot. I actually modeled it this short, and I've just been shouting into the... Look at how short it is. I'm just a fucking idiot. Okay, never mind. So, yeah, I am hallucinating. So, that's fine, though, because we can just scale it up. And the idea here is that we take a look at the spotlight, and we take a look at this funnel, and we try and kind of line them up. One of the issues is, of course, that our funnel is not the right shape for the light. Let's go ahead and try it like this. So once we do that, we can just drop in another material onto this and get it going. Just duplicate this classic sun particle, drop it in. And instead of being classic sun particle, this is going to be flashlight halo. And the flashlight halo is going to just be an adjusted version of all this. So if we were to just bring it to maybe here, and then not a very clean wrapping job, that's fine. No, that's not the one I wanted. And that's the way I want it to be. And then what we can do is this length and offset is probably going to be garbage. I don't think this is exactly what we need, but we'll go ahead and put it in here. 20. And then the color isn't going to work because there is no particle system providing the color. So that's fine for now. We'll just leave it like that. And we're just going to see how it looks. But I think I want to rotate it. There. Now, obviously, this is just a prototype. So as you can see, what we've got here is a sort of prototype. And it's really a little bit too aggressive even now. Since we're not overriding the color, not overriding the tint, get super aggressive. And the other problem is, of course, that we can see how it spins. The spinning makes no sense in this particular case. Now, I'm not sure why the player's putting their hands up. There shouldn't be... That mesh should not have any collider on it, so I'm not sure why the player's panicking about it. I guess it was probably detecting the rope. So I don't like that snap. And there are a couple of other things I don't like. That snap I don't like, but I think I can fix it by doing a lerp. It's not the Halo's fault that that snap is awkward. It's my programming when I created this object. And the other problem is the way that it spins, but I think the answer to that is that we really should have a particle effect very similar to what we had before. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and just stick a particle effect in here. Now, if I do this, I'm going to have to do like 8 other things. Well, we'll figure it out later. So once again, we're going to have a start speed of 0. And we're going to have like a lifetime of maybe 12. We're going to switch over to having a mesh funnel. There we go. And we're going to change the scale. Let's drop in the correct material. Boy, that's garbage. I have a 3D start rotation. We'll need to pass in the actual values here. The alpha over lifetime. No, fuck you. Come back. Fuck you. There we go. Why is it doing that? Why does it keep closing the editor without my clicking or anything? Whatever. So in theory, this should work. In practice, it looks a little strange. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but obviously it's not the right setup. So we're going to try and put it in the right spot simply by having it line up more or less with what we've got here. And a big part of that is going to be choosing the right scales. This is more or less the same scale. And we'll do a random between two constants here, and we'll go for like a much smaller one on the inside. And right now they're much too opaque. There we are. Let's see how that feels. Okay, you can see how it gets in the way. It's not opaque. It's too opaque. It's much too opaque. So this looks dumb in this mode, and it turns out it is dumb. I think part of the problem might simply be that the flashlight halo, I don't see any reason why it's dark. Like, why does it turn brown? Doesn't make any sense. But I think we need to make sure that this is like much closer to the same size. All I'm trying to do is avoid Z fighting. And we'll reduce the rate of emission down to like 3. We'll pre-bake. But I just don't understand why it turns dark. I think what it must be is that this here is actually black in the transparent parts, or at least it's considered black. Let's open this up in the shader editor. What we're going to do is we are not going to use the albedo. We're just going to use white. I'm going to see whether that fixes this. It may or it may not. No, it didn't change a damn thing. Why does it turn brown? No part of this involves making it brown. Except for I'm multiplying it wrong. Okay, so right now I'm actually multiplying the emission, which is bringing it closer to brown. Okay, so that is the issue. Unfortunately, if I don't multiply the emission, then I get like a situation where it is going to glow brilliantly regardless of the opacity. See that? So even though these have an extremely low opacity, That doesn't affect how bright the emission is. I'm not allowed to give it an albedo. So I don't have any options to give it an albedo. All I have is the option for the emission. But the problem is that the emission doesn't take the opacity into account when emitting. And unfortunately, that means that what we do get is as it goes out towards the transparent edges, it actively becomes darker. It emits a darker color, which overwrites whatever's behind it. When what I really want it to do is just overwrite less. I want to do an alpha blend, but I can't do an alpha blend if it's lit. What does alpha to coverage actually mean? No. We could try a custom blend mode. I'm a little bit nervous about this. That seems to actually work. Let's find out. All right, it looks weird, but it no longer looks completely opaque. So what we're seeing here is a bunch of randomly rotated particles. Each particle... Oh. Well, the lifetime alpha should really be... Why is the lifetime alpha not working? It's just popping into existence. Source alpha, which is presumably the opacity, right? Are they overlapping, says David Goder. Well, yeah, this is like 30 particles. If we bring it down to just one particle, you'll be able to see what's going on, I think. Oh. We got some weird streaks. I'm not necessarily against them. But what I am against is the fact that the alpha isn't actually the alpha. This is... What? There is no shape like that on the texture. So in theory, there should only be a single one of these. Oh, I see. We got a start lifetime of 12, but a duration of 5. All right, so we were having some Z fighting there. That's what we were seeing. That fades away nicely. I can't imagine this is actually going to work, though. Let's go ahead and bring back the emission. Look at how dense that is. If we stop randomly rotating... Yeah, look at all that Z fighting. All right, well, gonna have to think about it some more. So this is how it looks when we do it like this. Well, that's not... This isn't going to work. We can't use this effect here. We'll figure out something else to do there. The only question is whether or not that effect works for the sunbeams. Let's go take a look and find out, because I changed so many things that I may have broken it. Yeah, it still looks the same. Needs a little bit of work here and there, but the basic idea is not too shabby. A little bit too dense. Might reduce the flow there. So let's go back and just reduce that a little bit. So if we make the duration 12 instead of 5 and hit pre-warm, we can turn emission down to 0.2. And one of the reasons that we're here, I forgot to set it up as a prefab, sorry. No, don't revert. Fuck. God, I miss them. The old version of this that didn't suck. So, what I was trying to say is, what if we extended the light? Because it might simply be that the range is too short. I can't imagine that's the case, though. I think there's something wrong with how the light is being applied. And it might simply be that there's too many lights in working order here. Now what I might do is add in, oh, I undid the rotation, didn't I? I'll have to add the rotation back in. And I might add in a particle system that just creates like little teeny floating particles. I'll need a new particle shader for that though, because I need them to do the opposite of what the old particles were going to do. I need them to fade out as you get further away. Otherwise they'll sparkle weird when you're far away from them. So we'll do that. We'll do that in a second here. This particle system is fine as is, except, oh, the 3D start rotation is on. Maybe we just had bad luck. So let's go ahead and create the fading away particles here. We can just use late transparency. Yes, we can just create another late transparency shader, or material. And we're going to call this nearby particles. So when we go back into a sunbeam here, gotta edit it, can't edit it, it won't let me edit it. It doesn't understand that I want to edit it. But when you try and change it here, it tells you you can't. I presume this got, okay, so that tiny bit, fine, it's fine. It's all good. So what we're going to want to do is create a duplicate of this particle system. Chabooey. And in this particle system, we're going to switch it out for the nearby particles instead of the classic sun particles. We can't do that. Now we can do it. And the nearby particles are going to be billboard view aligned particles, and their size is going to be why can't I see them? Obviously, we want a much higher emission over time. Why can't I see them? Oh, they're just all up there. So what we actually want to do is have them over the length of the cone instead. There we go. And the only issue here is that the cone is not the same shape as it actually appears. We need to have a much, much longer cone. So we're going to just go ahead and increase the length of the cone. And we're going to want to decrease the angle. And just kind of, yeah, it's close enough. So this is how it looks at the moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to drop in a texture. I think that's probably a little bit too faint. Okay, so that's not too crappy. And we'll bring them way, way down. That's too big. So like 0.03 and 0.05. That's closer to how we want it. The distances involved are going to be much, much lower. And we're going to want to make them quite a bit brighter. Yeah, there we go. Let's try it on for size. Sorry, David Goder said some stuff. Stacking multiple planes facing towards... Oh, come on. Sorry, window is misbehaving. It's maximized a whole bunch of shit. Stacking multiple planes facing towards the player with an alpha wouldn't work. For the flashlight, that is. I honestly don't know what the best approach for the flashlight is going to be. The problem is that the camera and the flashlight are aligned but offset, which means that regardless of what we try and do, it's going to cause problems. Maybe the best idea would be to just spawn in a lot of world coordinate dust in the flashlight's beam. But I don't really know. I'll have to think about it. So the idea here is that as we get close, we should start to see some sparkling floating dust. Yeah, it's a little bit too close. Let's go ahead and extend that range to a little bit further than that, like maybe 10. So let's go over and take a look at this dude. It's still not very brightly lighting the rock, even though I increased the light distance. Yeah, that's more like what I had in mind. Only issue is they're not moving. Let's give them a little bit of noise. So if we come down into the noise section, noise, we'll just bring down the strength. That'll do. Let's find out. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine how I want the flashlight to look, and I'm sort of thinking that maybe it should have holographic edge elements, because the holographic stuff kind of works. But I think that would be really distracting. So this particle effect is pretty good, but you can see how the particles stray outside of the light beam. That's not necessarily bad, but I don't want them to stray as far as they do. If we can separate out the axes again, we might be able to just make it so they only do it inside of the z-axis and just go up and down some. And that should reduce the amount of spreading. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit less obnoxious. I don't know. I kind of like it. What do you think? Needs work, yeah? Not sure exactly what the best idea for the texture is. This texture is something I just inherited from a different part of the game, and I'm not really sure that it works because it's got these creases. But the basic idea is, I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. I'll take a screenshot. I'm going to stop real soon here. I just want to post this screenshot, and then I'll stop. My voice is gone anyway. Working on some indie dev. Oh, Screenshot Saturday today, huh? There's Saturdays. Did you know that? Screenshot Saturday. Wow, it's not even in the top, like, 50 anymore. I guess nobody uses it. My guess is that people use it, and maybe I spelled it wrong. Whatever. David Gooder says that he likes it now, which is high praise because he said he didn't like the other one, which I agree. I didn't like it either. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you around, and I may stream off my normal times. Like, I'll stream at the normal times, but I may stream at random as well. If I had a better voice, I'd stream video games, but I don't, so I won't. Bye.